as if willing themselves to be invisible, and thus out of harm's way. This was when soldiers were the most vulnerable, and the tightly packed men in each of the dozen assorted craft knew that a hit anywhere would impact on something soft, meaty, and human. In a perverse and illogical way, the American soldiers hoped they would be opposed only by rifles and machine guns. Anything, they thought, but the damn German 88mm anti-tank guns that could instantly turn their frail craft into flaming coffins. But where were the Germans? The April morning was clear, and the GIs knew the little boats must stand out vividly to enemy eyes that must be watching them. Yet the only sound they heard was the roar of the straining motors and the splash of the waves, only inches below the freeboard. The launches were overcrowded, with almost 20 stuffed into some of them. The men themselves were strangely silent. This was water. Their environment was land. Afloat, they felt useless. On land, you could dig a hole and hide, or even run. But what the hell did you do on water? Soldiers would look up and glance forward, trying to pick out the places where terror would emerge, but saw nothing frightening. The German countryside was green and friendly, like something from a postcard. Where could there be terror? At this crossing point, the Elbe was less than a quarter mile of blue-green water, yet it might as well have been the English Channel for the fear it caused. "Lieutenant, get your head down," yelled Sergeant Jack Logan. "Please," he amended, belatedly conscious of the difference in their ranks, and that he shouldn't show up any officer, even a brand-new replacement like Second Lieutenant David Singer. "I want to see, Sarge. I want to be the first Jewish officer east of the Elbe, maybe the first in Berlin." The young sergeant chuckled, and a few of the other men nervously joined in. Sergeant Logan was big for an infantryman, nearly 6 feet tall, stocky and muscular, and with a shock of red hair that was kept out of view by his helmet. He had open, even features, and some, particularly his mom, described him as having a friendly face, whatever the hell that meant. He certainly wasn't friendly with a rifle in his hands. Logan contrasted sharply with the shorter young officer's pale skin and thin blonde hair. Lieutenant Singer would be bald before he was 40. Logan liked young Lieutenant David Singer. He had arrived only a couple of days earlier and was replacing another young lieutenant who'd gotten badly wounded. It was hard to realize that he, the old man of the platoon, was only a year older than the lieutenant's 23 years. War had such a wonderful way of aging its participants. "Can this thing go faster?" came a lament from the rear of the launch. Logan thought the voice was Crawford's, but he couldn't tell. Lieutenant Singer responded, "If you want, you can get out and push." This was greeted with a few more nervous giggles and an offer to paddle with helmets. The jokes were stupid, but they broke the tension. Anything to hide the fact that they could be dead in an instant. The water shallowed, and the boat slowed, finally crunching up on the mud embankments. The men hurled themselves from their unwelcome craft and ran up the low embankment, fanning out like the veterans they were. There was no need for either Singer or Logan to give any orders, and the two men prudently concentrated on staying out of everyone's way. To his left and right, the other craft disgorged their human cargoes as well. In a matter of moments, almost half of D Company was safely across and forming a defensive perimeter. The commandeered boats began their return to the west bank of the Elbe, and would return again and again, with more and more soldiers. On the far shore, engineers were assembling a pontoon bridge. Singer fidgeted with his rifle. "Sergeant Logan?" "What, sir?" "Where are the Germans?" Logan took off his helmet and wiped his head quickly before replacing it.